We've now entered the sensory deprivation chamber that is Secret Summit. So welcome, everybody. Let's go around and do our introductions, I guess, in the order in which you appear on the screen. So from Ethan to Zaki to Jack to Dean, introduce yourself and your project really briefly, and then we'll go straight into my questions.
Cool. I'm Ethan. I guess my project is Cosmos. been building that for like 6 years, if not longer, depending on how you count. These days, I'm CEO of Informal Systems. We're one of the biggest core Cosmos developers, leading Tendermint and Cosmos Hub development, interchain security, and IBC. The Hermes relayer, and we do a lot of security audits, formal verification. We run a validator. And nowadays we're pushing a new approach to economics and finance that we call collaborative finance, or Co-Fi. So we've been publishing more and more about that.
I'm Zaki, longtime Cosmos contributor. I work on a project called Sommelier Finance. Also work with everyone else on everything else. Yeah.
Hey guys, my name is Jack Zampolin. I'm the founder and CEO of Strangelove. We do a lot of IBC work and sort of generically contribute to a lot of different Cosmos open source, including projects like Juno and Osmosis and the Cosmos Hub.
I'm Dean Tribble. I'm CEO of Agoric, and I'm either the earliest to the party here or the latest to the party here. I've been working on large-scale distributed systems and smart contracts since the late 80s, but we're building a Cosmos-based chain to do smart contracts in JavaScript for the other 15 million developers on the planet that don't program in Rust or Go.
Well, Dean, you were at the first IBC meeting before we had a line of code written or a single line of spec. So I think you were early.
Fair enough.
We're all early, but that's really early.
Yeah. Everybody that's listening is early.
Yes, but it's amazing because yes, these are, it's crazy to see, right? Like just like how in the secret ecosystem, like we were writing about privacy, there was no code on chain, there was no mainnet for at least 5 years since the original white papers were written from 2015 to 2020. That's how long it took to get to this L1 universe. And then similarly with Cosmos, like all these ideas were out there, but it did get to mainnet. And now proof of stake, DPoS, governance, and IBC, these are all live technologies. It's unbelievable. Most ecosystems never get to that point, never get past the white paper phase. So I think there's a huge amount of respect in the secret ecosystem and beyond for what's been accomplished in the Cosmos, specifically because it's a culture of shippers, specifically because this is production tech that started as a dream with people in a room and ended up being something that's now being used to secure billions of dollars in value and a ton of different app chains that are active globally. So congratulations to all of you on the long-term vision that's already been accomplished. But with that said,
just like one quick point on that. There's a good way to do software. Get software out in front of users and continue to iterate on it. And I think that like, I always go back to this MIT talk Zaki gave, but this was the culture in Cosmos long before that. And it's sort of carried by everyone here. And so many ecosystems have ignored that. And really the only way to ship something big and hairy and ambitious is to ship, iterate, and sort of like continue building towards the direction. And that's what we've been doing for years. And, Secret's also been following a very similar path as well. So love that.
Well, thank you for that. And yes, of course, it's an iterative process and it never ends.
Secret is one of the first networks on the Cosmos, in sort of the Cosmos ecosystem, that like really sort of modified the stack in a pretty in a pretty like deep way, right? To bring in the enclaves, to bring in SGX was like the deepest modification that we saw to date. And Secret 2.0 is like, again, a remix of a whole bunch of Cosmos technologies in a very different way than like the way interchain security is being shipped on other chains. But like this is the value of like these composable technical primitives, and having a platform that like people can extend in directions that like are an easy direction, easily extend in other directions.
I think that leads me well to my first question then, my first structured question for all of you. because we keep using this word, Cosmos. And my first question for all of you might be my hardest question, because it's descriptive of the ecosystem, it's descriptive of the Cosmos Hub, it's descriptive of Cosmos SDK, which underlies everything that we're talking about here, all these technologies and the extension of that stack. So let's not spend too much time on this, but I would like you to start with this hard question. How do you define Cosmos?
Since I'll start.
Yeah,
Right?
let's start with
How do you
you.
define Earth? Right. Well, it's the planet, it's the people, it's a rock that I can throw at you, right? That sort of thing. So to me, as a platform building with Cosmos SDK, as an early contributor to IBC, to me, Cosmos is the extended connected ecosystem, either using Cosmos SDK or Tendermint or IBC, right? Because it sort of loosely covers the interchain, and it's sort of the people that are all working on that shared vision of independent platform systems all connected, secure blockchains all connected with the extended interchain to make this loosely coupled growing secure system, rather than there being sort of one pyramid or chain or empire. So that's my latecomer interpretation.
Yeah, I mean, I think of Cosmos as fundamentally a philosophy of political economy, and which also means of blockchain design. So it's first and foremost an approach to doing things, an approach motivated by sovereignty and interoperability as sort of the fundamental values for how we build systems and sort of empower communities to to develop infrastructure and applications that serves their values, that serves their needs, and that allows them to reflect and express themselves, in the ways they see fit. But of course, it's also a particular technology stack for achieving all of that. And that philosophy is sort of imbued throughout the whole stack to enable sovereignty, sovereign expression of political economic values, and interoperability between these, distinct sovereign zones. So, there's really a sort of larger story about political economic expression and what we're working towards in terms of empowering communities to engage more directly and have more control over their political economies, rather than being, subservient to particular platforms or, particular tokens or economic models. They can sort of decide for themselves how they want to engage and who they want to engage with and how, and so on.
What I would add to that is, over the last 2 years, I think Cosmos has become a little bit more grounded in sort of reality than its sort of pure philosophical roots, because it has become a community of people who are engaged in a certain set of political discourse with each other, and there are political battles about who gets to run a naming service, and what vision for Atom is correct, and we are at some point, to a certain extent, Cosmos is a culture and a society, right? And that's also sort of a big definition of what it is that is Cosmos. It is just like people who choose to locate themselves in the world of blockchain and the world of open source software, connected to this society of people, and choose to keep putting energy into that society. And so, yeah, I mean, that is the ultimately what Cosmos is right now. Is it's the people who are trading bad kids on Stargaze, and people who are yield farming on Osmosis, and people who are IBCing like madmen, and people who are dodging rug pulls from crazy new chains that get started. And that is where and people who work on Tendermint and Cosmos and relay IBC packets and argue about all of these things.
I think that I love all of these answers, and it's very true. I think the one that I've seen recently that I would just bring in here to add is that Cosmos is a design pattern around modularity and interoperability in blockchain and sovereign systems. And you see this from Tendermint, and we're expanding IBC now to other sort of sovereign blockchain ecosystems. You also see this within Cosmos with things like Celestia and Wormhole, which is going to be a Cosmos chain, and Axelar. These sort of modular and interoperable design patterns are, I think, a huge part of what Cosmos is. Zaki's definition reminded me of a network state as well, which I've sort of increasingly started thinking of Cosmos as.
A good definition of people who are of what is Cosmos is the group of people who debate what is Cosmos.
I like it. That's how you do a transition. Yes. No. I mean, this sounds very like Hofstadter's. Like,
I don't think anyone who's not part of Cosmos cares what is about this debate, but for people who are part of Cosmos, people care.
I really love this self-referential definition. It really speaks to the fact that like this is a self-contained system that no one can truly understand without being within the same self-contained system. So that aside, a perfect transition actually, Jack, given your prompt here. I wanted to get straight into this keyword, interoperability. And maybe that's a little bit easier to define than this big sweeping word Cosmos. So interoperability. What does interoperability actually look like for all of you? You know, with chains talking to each other, with assets moving or contracts being called. What is it about the vision of IBC specifically that makes it such a powerful technology and an interesting technology in the context of just interoperability, the concept?
Yeah. I have a very quick answer on this, and it's re-enabling composability and sort of like permissionless innovation. When you expose an API on the internet, anyone can go call that, subject to your rate limits and IP blocks. And within IBC, I think that's the world we're moving to. This is the only way to build truly globally scalable systems. And I think that we've seen over and over again with these attempts to build monolithic L1s where everything lives within one shared execution environment. There's obvious downsides to that architecture, and the only other way forward is through something that looks like the internet, and turns out we've got it. So that would be my answer.
I mean, it was fun. So before Osmosis, before the IBC go to market, right? You know, we were, you know, the vision of Cosmos was always this, you know, always included this independent machines or chains, you know, loosely coupled communicating over IBC. And, you know, we all sort of had that internal vision, as did, you know, much. I mean, that was what got people excited about Cosmos, is they got that. And that was what a future, you know, that's what a future would look like. Right. And we all worked for years on this IBC stuff to get these things connected, but people couldn't really appreciate what that would actually look like for real. And then we had the go-to market of IBC where we finished it, shipped it. It showed up on various chains, and then suddenly, you know, out comes the first chain that really used it and sold it and had it be usable, that let you, you know, bring assets from other chains and bring them over to this independent chain and put them in an AMM. And some people suddenly, you know, oh my God, that's what that is, right? And then, you know, then more chains started doing this. Before that happened, you know, Zaki and I, we talked about the, you know, the Zaki and Dean Roadshow, where we were going around to various press people and explaining what is interoperability and why is interoperability interesting. And all these chains were like, yes, interoperability someday will be a great thing. In the meantime, we're going to take over the world and we will be your only chain, right? And then there was sort of this period with like 3 months where it went from interoperability is the someday future that maybe people will care about, and everyone's Cosmos is going, no, interoperability is the future. When suddenly everyone was like, well, of course we're interoperable. We've been interoperable the whole time. That's always been part of our mission. And so now everyone understands that the world is not going to be ETH. The world is not going to be Aave. The world is not going to be a thing. It's going to be the collective of all the things that people do and get connected. And that, you know, and Cosmos really led that vision out into the crypto space and took it from, you know, yeah, maybe someday we'll care, to, oh, of course we've got that as part of our story. It's always been our thing, right? You know, and everyone now takes it for granted, but it really is that independent permissionless connectivity is what interoperability means.
Yeah. It's amazing how many things are now just taken for granted that were like heretical, you know, 5 years ago or something. So it's been pretty funny to witness. But Yeah, I mean the
if it wasn't heretical 5 years ago, we weren't innovating enough. So
exactly, yeah. So make sure your ideas are blasphemous is
That's right.
is the key to success. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, interoperability is about communication and the ability to communicate between distinct processes, machines, right? It's and for us, I mean, I like to use the community computer analogy, and I think of each blockchain as a computer for a community. It's a single computing device, logically run by many people all over the world, that serves the needs of a community, just like a personal computer serves the needs of a person, an individual. And these computers need to be interoperable with each other, which means they need to be able to communicate with each other, send messages and receive responses, and tell each other about what's going on, and access each other's services and things like that. And so that's a very well understood model in the internet. I mean, we're using it right now. Our computers are interoperating right now to bring you this this live panel over the internet. And so the same thing could be true for blockchains and for our community computers. And that's what the interoperability in Cosmos and IBC are all about, is bringing that standards of communication from the internet, from between personal computing machines to community computing machines. And we're starting to see that grow kind of exponentially. And a lot of people think IBC is just about, it's just how Cosmos does token bridging. But of course, it's much more general than that, right? Token bridging is just the first application. We can do arbitrary kind of message passing, and we're starting to see that be proven out with interchain accounts, and now interchain security, which is coming, and mesh security, and all these other applications that are being built over IBC, using IBC as a general purpose standard to do arbitrary kinds of communication between blockchains to enable, like Jack was saying, new kinds of composability, or to reinvigorate composability. We separated everything onto different machines, and now we can connect them back together.
Yeah. I'd like to add one more thing that really is dramatically different, and sort of gradually people sort of internalize it so they will stop thinking about it. But I've been doing interoperability and connectivity for a long time, and even I get caught by surprise by the consequences of it, which is someone new rolling out their chain in Cosmos. They can just take their token and launch it on Osmosis or Crescent. They can take their NFT and bring it over to Agoric or Juno, or a chain that has something to do with NFTs. It's 2 years ago, launching a blockchain, you launched your own new isolated tower. And, I think of sort of each blockchain, Ethan had his analogy. I think of it as sort of each one is a city, right? You want to have local services that are fast, but there's cities that are good at meat packing, and there are cities that are good at finance, and there are cities that are good at coal and whatever, that you can have these specialized things, but man, it's useful to tie into the rest of an economy. And people are getting to the point where IBC is so robust, so pervasive, and there's enough chains out there that you switch to, I don't have to do this piece because someone else already is. I will do the part I'm really great at, launch a chain, and I'm just connected, right? The place where it caught us by surprise, we were building a stable token for the Agoric economy, because, if you're going to launch a whole bunch of little businesses and connect them together, you've got to be an economy, you require a currency. And it was only in talking to other folks in the Cosmoverse, just like, oh, what we're building would be useful for them, and we're already connected. We don't even have to really think about it. We just connect to them and they can use it. That's awesome. And it's something that gradually people will take for granted as a design thing, but it's an enormous achievement from the overall collective ecosystem. So.
I think that was an extremely thorough answer from all of you collectively.
We love
so
interoperability. What are you going to do?
I know. So, well, I mean, interoperability is basically baked into the vision of Cosmos, but there is one other thing that's built into the Cosmos and built into the stack as it's created, which is this idea of governance. And I know, Ethan, you've thought obviously a lot about the role of governance. All of you have obviously thought about the role of governance in these changes, the risks, the advantages. I mean, it creates substantial opportunities for collaboration and for growth and democratizing management of these protocols, these complex beasts that all interoperate. And it also comes with a lot of challenges because these systems are permissionless. So there's these aspects of governance that end up being very technical, and then there's these aspects that end up being very political and social. So I want us to think this through just for a moment. Like, what do you currently feel about the state of governance in the Cosmos and the role of governance in the Cosmos? And what have you learned about governance by experiencing it, observing it, or researching it that you think is essential for all of us as leaders and contributors to understand about governance?
I think that we've learned a lot about the way that the current system works. I think that, if you look at what we have, it's basically shareholder voting with tokens. And there are a lot of very well documented flaws with systems that look like that. And I think that we've had a lot of idealism and positivity that we've used to be able to work through some of the flaws of that system and to try to make it a little bit better. But we're currently running up against the limits of what we can do with current governance tooling. This is why adding things like councils and sub-DAOs is extremely important moving forward. And I think that Cosmos governance and this sort of like ability for communities to spin up their own blockchains, that was revolutionary. And we've sort of rested on our laurels there in a lot of ways because we've had other priorities as a community. And this governance has been kind of a bit of a tragedy of the commons. And right now we're in this position where we're all voting on, so many different chains. I think I did like 5 or 6 votes this morning prior to this panel, just like clearing out my queue. And it's a ton of work to keep on top of, and it's hard for people to kind of understand what they're voting for. I work on the lower levels of the software, but even then there's a lot of governance proposals where well, sure, let's add this token to this pool. So yeah, I don't know. I think that I'm not alone in saying that Cosmos governance needs better tools. But yeah, I guess that would be my high level thoughts.
Yeah, I saw Jason Choi keeps asking me, what is the DApp that you use most? And I think right at this point, the DApp I use most is Cosmos governance. Which is,
you're a politician when
wake up, check whether or not the proposals you care about are over quorum, go harass some people to vote if your proposal's not over quorum. It is the day in and day out of it. I think the biggest success of I wouldn't say that Cosmos governance is a failure, right? There are a number of it's not a failure, right? There's a lot of it has done stuff, and there's it's frankly done more stuff, had more both contentious debate that hasn't resulted in complete collapse and stagnation. It's made highly consequential decisions going all the way back to turning on just transfers on the Cosmos Hub. And so, I think that there is a lot of positivity there, but it's not scaling. I think the general theme of Cosmos in 2021 and 2022 was get this thing that we'd been imagining for a really long time off the ground. The challenges of 2023 and beyond are now, how do we scale all of this thing? We have 50 blockchains. There's a contentious political debate on some blockchain every single day. At 500 blockchains, it'll probably be every single hour. There's just there's a lot of general drama in the Cosmos ecosystem. All of these things I think are challenges to our ability to scale. And a lot more innovation and thought. It's going to be as hard scaling this thing as it was building it.
Just one number that I want to inject right here, based on if you go look at MintScan on the sort of larger Cosmos chains, you're seeing around 50 to normally between 30 and 70,000 votes on major proposals. If you do a little bit of analysis on that, around 10 to 15% of accounts voting are very small balances and look like they're trying to farm airdrops. So that gives you this rough number of 50,000 very engaged, very active Cosmos voters on probably 5 to 10 different chains are regularly hitting those numbers, which I find incredibly impressive on Osmosis with the amount of governance they have. So when we're talking about numbers and orders of magnitude, I think it's really important to look at the actual number of votes. And it's 2 orders of magnitude larger than every other DAO in the world.
I will jump in here. So I am really blown away by Cosmos governance and or rather, again, what is Cosmos, right? You guys are focusing a lot on Gaia or more generally, but partly the permissionless nature and decoupled nature means we've got lots of governance experiments happening and succeeding in parallel, right? We've got DAO that's got all people doing all sorts of things that have nothing to do with sort of the Cosmos command line level governance, but is tied into these larger, we want to govern this sub thing a different way. You know, democracies suck at architecture. They suck at sort of executive function. It's, you know, what we did is we've got this big hammer of voting that we have to use for everything at this low level. People are gradually turning that into, you know, subcommittees and executive committees that can do things. So we've got an experiment where we've got, you know, the Econ Committee, which is independent of Agoric. They are elected to go manage a particular sub thing, and they're doing an awesome job. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that, but we get to see a lot more of that because all these different parts of the cosmos can independently innovate and we can learn from each other. The other thing I want to add with respect to governance is there are people who have been thinking about how humans have been doing governance for thousands of years. Many of those ideas were brought in. I still love, you know, Ethan, when you came and talked to Agoric about cosmos governance, and we learned how deliberate some of the elements like signaling votes can't have power so that you really get a signal rather than get it entangled with execution and various things like that. But, you know, other people in the world of governance of, you know, everything from nonprofits to you know, central banks have thought about it for a long time. And it is largely a human invention, but people have been studying it, and it is worth tapping into those experts. And people are starting to do so because they can choose to do so independent of what other chains are doing. And we get this, you know, again, this permissionless evolution. So I'm really excited about all these different chunks of governance. And I think we need tools for finer and finer governance so we can elect subcommittees to go do stuff and organize in different ways.
Amazing. And I completely agree. Like, we are seeing, I mean, to use the language, right? Macrocosms and microcosms of all of this governance behavior emerging, subgroups of subgroups of subgroups. It's very fractal, but it's also very interconnected, because one thing we can also acknowledge, combining my last 2 questions here, right? We're seeing interoperability and governance result in a situation where you have the same individual actors, the same humans present in all of these systems in sub roles, in global roles. For example, I'm serving on the Interchain Communications Council with other Cosmos members, but also I'm a subject of Secret governance, and Secret Foundation is funded by the blockchain directly. So we're already all serving multiple roles in the ecosystem. Some place us very specifically within one ecosystem. Some are in these sort of cross-functional, cross-ecosystem roles, but ultimately it is testing in prod. We're testing governance in prod, we're testing the tech in prod, and we're going to have to see what happens with that. It's not always clean. Sometimes it's very messy. But I do want to leave time for our last question, which has the most to do with Secret Summit. So I just want to make sure we get to it, and then we'll sign off this panel and move to the next. This is Secret Summit. So clearly we care about privacy. Clearly we think privacy has a role to play in the Cosmos. Cosmos has this ethos and this vision around the global adoption of these technologies. Secret has a vision as well. It's related to that vision. It's similar to that vision, but we put privacy at the core of that vision, and we surround it with everything else. And we see so much of the Cosmos ethos in our own mission. We just, I think, have positioned the core a little bit differently. So I'm going to ask all of you here, since you all are part of the Cosmos and you all think about all these issues, you all have your own ethos and mission. What do you see as the role of privacy in the broader Cosmos? What is it going to allow us to build that hasn't yet been built? And then maybe specifically a word that I use a lot when I talk about privacy, what would privacy mean for the sustainability of the Cosmos, its technologies, and the systems that we're building as the actors in it?
I'll start. So, I mean, Agoric runs Cosmos SDK. It's running the, you know, and Tendermint, which has the normal, you know, everything is auditable, everything is transparent. Transparency is great, but from our perspective, I mean, our first funder was Zcash. You know, privacy needs to be normal, right? Privacy is normal. You know, I grew up in a world where we did not have the level of connectivity and scrutiny and oversight from either other people, corporations, or government, right? and because the technology wasn't there. And that's my expectation. So humans need it. Humans deserve it. Businesses need it. Businesses deserve it. And yeah, governments need it, and they don't really deserve it. So I think it's critical. I think that we don't currently have it. I'm really, I've been very excited about what Secret is doing, pushing those boundaries forward. I'm very excited about all the groups that are pushing various privacy technologies forward, because I want to interoperate with them, and I want to gradually incorporate elements of that in the overall Cosmos SDK so everyone can benefit from them. But any of these dimensions, we all need to be thinking about how do we get more and more of that so it's the default. The world made great steps forward for privacy in various places, like going, the Let's Encrypt going from most websites using HTTP to most websites using HTTPS. But we've also made a lot of steps backwards, and we need to kind of keep pushing forward in order to, this is not a battle you win. This is a battle you continue to win, right?
Privacy is necessary for an open society in the electronic age. Like, I think that this is sort of like not debatable. And I think, yeah, as Dean is mentioning, there's a number of reasons why we didn't build this into blockchains at first. But as a community, and Secret has been at the front of this for a while, pushing forward on privacy. I think that one thing about Cosmos that makes it unique for privacy is it enables full control over your consensus and your application development platform, while still enabling you to interconnect with the rest of the ecosystem. And I think that as privacy tech becomes easier and easier to use, more and more ubiquitous, we will see this sort of smooth transition from these more transparent chains over to more private chains, and smooth interoperability between them. Because there are use cases, while privacy is necessary, it is not mandated everywhere. There are use cases for these very open, global, and transparent systems, but they need to have a way to interact with privacy. And I think that IBC is kind of unique in offering that, and one of the big reasons why we're going to win.
Yeah, I mean, privacy needs to be considered a basic human right, and it's also just like basic hygiene. And in some sense, all of our blockchains they're pretty smelly right now, because they're exuding information that is impolite, and they're not showering in the correct privacy technology, let's say. And part of the idea in Cosmos early on was like, well, there's many possible approaches to privacy, and we don't know. When the tech was first built out, it was still a little bit early. There was a lot of being experimented with. There's obviously been major advances in the sort of cryptography over the last 5 to 10 years, especially, and having the systems out there has really pushed forward on the R&D and the funding for the privacy tech. And now we're seeing a number of different privacy technologies and solutions emerging in the Cosmos universe, which is exactly the purpose of this technology, is to make it possible for people to experiment with different kinds of technology, including privacy, also including other sorts of things. And so like Jack was saying, I think we'll start to see much more privacy being adopted across the board. We'd like to see it baked into the SDK at some point. Of course, we're not quite there yet, but as folks like Secret and Penumbra and Anoma and others keep experimenting and pushing the bar forward on private transactions, we'll start to see that become adopted more widely. So it's absolutely critical, and it's great that there's a number of projects working on pushing it forward.
Zaki, any perspective? I'll also accept no.
I think in general, like what I would say is I would come back to the theme of scalability, which is blockchain technology does not scale really if we do not have privacy, right? It limits its use cases to any form. I think people are willing to sacrifice their privacy for expectation of profit. Is like the reality of the situation, right? Is like in a world where everyone's gambling on things that'll go up 1000x. People are willing to be like, privacy, okay, we'll deal with it later. But that's not a sustainable world. That's not what blockchain technology looks like at maturity. And if we do not have, and I think like one of the things that I also am is just like real world assets coming onto blockchains will always bring regulatory burdens with them. And so like how that whole thing gets mixed together, I think is going to be like a very big part of Cosmos going forward. It's like, how do we compose the real world asset sort of regulatory boundaries that like come with it, with the with like providing enough privacy that blockchain technology really scales.
Yeah. I think that's a really interesting point to end on for that question, because blockchains by their nature, and the Cosmos in particular, are multi-jurisdictional. And we're talking about bringing in global assets into global systems with global regulatory regimes. There's a lot of conversations. There's a lot of conversations about how global regulations and governance interact with on-chain governance. And how the people in these systems overlap. So I'm really interested to see what the future of the Cosmos looks like, what the future of privacy in the Cosmos looks like. But I, like you, firmly believe that the future of the Cosmos ends with adoption. Like, this is the ecosystem that's ready for prime time. It's ready to be used. It's ready to be expanded. It's foundational for everything from stable coins to DeFi protocols, to metaverses, to non-fungibles. Like, everything is here, it's ready, it's being experimented with, and we're all part owners of that mission and part owners of that future. So really exciting to have all of you here today. I really appreciate you guys taking the time out of your busy days, because I know how busy they are. I talk with you about how busy they are. So thank you. It is not going unnoticed by both me, the team, the whole Secret ecosystem. Thank you for prioritizing this. Thanks for coming and sharing your vision. And we will see you guys, I'm sure, very shortly around the Secret ecosystem. Thank you again.